Hello, my name is Graham. I want to introduce to Australia in particular, where I live, the fastest possible way to take up EVs amongst most people in the most economically viable and socially and politically acceptable method possible. If anyone wants to argue otherwise, at the end of this, I would be very, very grateful, and so would the world, and listen to the argument, because that would be a great thing to have competition in arguments in regards to how we go for the transition from fuel guzzling cars to EVs. It's a very simple method. It's about leasing EVs rather than buying them, and leasing them at a fee what's equivalent to rego, an annual fuel cost, and some sort of lease fee. It's very simple, and there's insurance, of course. But that then allows a negotiated lease according to data fed in by the system. When you go through the process of leasing a vehicle, you're putting how many. If you can verify how many miles you've done in your car since you've bought it, because it's got on the trip meter, and it gives you an average, and it gives you some sort of average fuel cost on that, which can be reductive. But that's a basics of how determining the lease fee according to income in what is a sliding scale system, where it then allows the take-up of EVs across society far faster, and amongst the poorer people, pensioners and low-income people especially. And then that allows then someone to tender out there who's making EVs, someone to tender then for a robust vehicle, the Henry Ford, the Model T Ford of the EV transition, or whatever you want to call it. That then allows, especially for Australia, where not all roads are smooth, and many roads in the outback are rough, and you need a robust vehicle that is reliable for people living where there's no public transport, and there's no alternative but to fossil fuels. But this way allows this very simple way of leasing an EV is extremely PC on all grounds, because it treats people equally, and it overcomes the political impediments to introducing EVs as fast as possible in Australia's situation. It also accelerates the reduction in need for importing fossil fuels. And it also, this way, accelerates, if that's the idea, accelerates the need, the emissions of CO2. Because it fulfills then many different problems, political problems. It solves those in a very highly efficient method that then has the greatest positive and practical result in a very simple and pragmatic way, rather than making EVs a political problem, which it ought not to be. It's just a device. All it is a device. That's all it is, like a washing machine, or video, or a phone. It's all it is a device. And if you can have this device, which happens to be a motor car, and if it's electronic, it is just a device, then have it this way, where it's leased at a cost appropriate and according to the income of the people, and according to their some sort of way of working out through the data available or process, that then allows a lease fee. And then that means, as I said, that someone can tender for the delivery of these vehicles, robust utilitarian vehicles suitable for Australian conditions, and therefore they're suitable for anywhere in the world, and therefore you have a universal system for introducing EVs to the world in a far faster way. You're actually reducing them in a far quicker way. This is exponential this way. The exponential effect is accelerated in this way. This is a way of accelerating it by using the Henry Ford method of appealing to the masses to take up EVs by making them affordable for them, you change the old dialogue, you change the economic equation, and you don't create massive amounts of debt trying to do something. Because if debt is the only way forward for people in regards to this climate change, then it becomes a financial problem, a financial disaster in the end, what then becomes in parallel to if there's going to be a climatic disaster, which we've seen the floods and all that, it becomes an even greater impediment for people to transition. It's all right saying you must transition, blah, 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 from the UN or whoever comes and speaking about these things, but unless they've got methods like I'm suggesting, well, all they're doing is blowing hot air and adding to the CO2 that goes into the air in all these meetings they have and saying we must do something on climate change, but as yet there isn't a method that's really socially acceptable on an economic level, on a basic level, that is also acceptable politically, and it doesn't stop the corporations. If the climate change is going to affect everyone, and we've seen in Sydney, the floods can affect the rich and the poor equally, tornadoes and cyclones can affect the rich and the poor equally, droughts can affect the rich and the poor mostly equally, so climate change can affect people unless the ultra rich and whatever we can escape from it. Climate change can affect people equally rich and poor. So you need another system, you need a method instead, what means you can accelerate on transition out of fossil fuels if that's your aim, to reduce CO2 faster. That it also allows a more equitative means of delivery, and it's not dependent on income and ability to get into debt, etc., because if you're only paying when it costs the fuel cost, average annual fuel cost to run a car, your rego and tyres and some sort of lease fee, then it's affordable for all people who already have a car, and encourages all young people to get straight into an EV rather than bothering with a fossil fuel car. It means you then can, by having this method, you can accelerate the manufacture of EVs if that's what your aim is to keep productivity up and then you can then supply, add to the supply chain the greater number of EVs, because there will be a far greater take-up by the market by this way than from what I've seen so far any other way. Just using market forces and that. When things are being levered to make the market forces rather irrelevant at the moment because of the way the world is. Because the world has an inability to cooperate peacefully to overcome what are dogmatic political problems created by various ideologies who really have some problems dealing with basic home economics, and that's what I suggest is a basis on one of the fundamental reasons most societies have serious problems and serious discussions they have within themselves. But this is a beginning, I hope, of a means of rethinking how we deal with many things on the planet, including climate change and how EVs are taken up. Leasing them on a pro rata cost comparable to the weekly cost or fortnightly or annual cost of running a car for the people on low income resolves the biggest political impediment and social and corporate impediment to getting a transition to EVs. And EVs are a massive variable of EVs out there on the market. We can see on the net very exciting machines out there coming onto the market. But how you get them so they're affordable is you lease them at a rate according to what it commonly costs run a car annually, without then the weekly debt payment for that car as well, because that's, if you got that on top of that, then you have really reduced the cost of running a vehicle. So therefore, in that way, you can reduce the cost of incomes to some degree if that's your aim, is to make the value of income what matters, not how many dollars per week you get, but the value of that in your transactions what matter far more these days than it is how much money you get. Thank you.